Hello everyone. We are back again with yet another powerful series. This time, we would be bringing to you stories from powerful women leaders across the globe. Since Women's Day is around the corner, we thought it would be nice to listen to their stories and know about the unpopular path that they have charted.
So, welcome to our next series under Impact X called as Give to Gain. Today, when we talk about leadership beyond titles, what we mean is leadership that is rooted in empowering, supporting, and strengthening each other. In our very first episode, we have Avantika Jadhav, Senior OD Consultant from HCM Next, as our moderator, and our wonderful guest, Neha Chopra, who is the Managing Director for Great Place to Work India. So, welcome everyone and join us for the full podcast where these two women leaders will be navigating us through their collective journey.
So Neha, let's start with your leadership journey. Was there a moment in your career where sharing your personal story, maybe a challenge, failure, or a lesson helped your dream grow stronger?
Oh, so many stories to share, Avantika, but I think two really come to the forefront. And let me talk about the first one. And I think while this may sound cliched that during COVID, we all went through a very, very challenging time, but I definitely wish to talk about this when I was leading HR for a very large services organization. And this was just the onset of COVID, and we all were really dumbstruck in terms of what is happening, what's happening to the workforce, what's happening across the industry. How are we going to respond to something like that? And we had a tragedy where one of our employees lost his life to COVID, right? And that was the initial days of COVID. And I remember my team was so upset and they were very, very, very sad. I mean, I can just say that they were sad, But we had to keep going because there was a huge workforce and we had about 2,000 people that we had to care for. And we had to essentially trigger off our, continuity plan. We had to start talking to our health partners to say, what is a new health cover that we can look at? We had to start talking to teams one-on-one and letting them know that all is well, continue to work from home. So there was a huge amount of accountability and responsibility that we had as a team and as HR, right? Because everybody started reaching out to us and saying, what's going to happen? Am I going to be okay? Do I have to step out? How will I work? Will I lose my job? So a lot of questions that came in. I think this was the time where, and I naturally have a lot of empathy towards people. I think I brought that really to the forefront. I started talking to my team one-on-one and then together. I think we did a marvelous job to really reach out to our workforce, talk to them, get them comfortable, implement and execute the BCP plan, work with senior leadership to ensure that, we're absolutely, very pristinely running the entire plan. So I think overall, it was, the time that my team really, really geared up. And I think we got so close also as people because they saw that, that was something that we were able to overcome. So I think that stands starkly. There are many, many, many more stories and, I can go on, but maybe for another day. But yeah, this really stands very, very stark.
Yeah. So because you mentioned COVID, I have a similar sort of story. So when COVID first hit, I was still in Australia. I was pursuing my MBA at that point. And like every other international student, you are working some kind of job. You're probably I was working at a supermarket. And when COVID hit, I got because I was working at the supermarket, I was an essential worker. So I was still able to get out of the house. But just being around people when you're in a different country, really makes so much of a difference, right? Even though you don't know those people, you're only seeing them a few hours a day, just having that human connect and being there for each other really helped make that journey a little easier.
Yeah. Yeah. Please. Yes.
So moving on to the next question. How did your leadership journey begin and how prepared were you really for it?
So, somehow if you go through my career, I've somehow been the blessed one where it's always been baptism by fire. I don't think I've ever been prepared for a role, right? Whether it's been, Avantika, I started my journey in sales and operations. I was never an HR person right from the start. So I think it's always been a lot of learning on the ground and getting to face a lot of critical and difficult situations. But my leadership journey began way back about, I think, a decade and a half ago. And I think that was just by chance that I used to work with one of the international banks. And I was brought in to head their entire OD and talent management at that point in time. And as I took on that role, I had a very small team. I had 2 people in my team. But I think what was most challenging was that I got to do far more than what I was doing in terms of my role, right? So I was doing beyond talent management. So I was doing a lot of HR related work. I was also appointed as the posh secretary or the member of the center. I think in all of that, I started anyways having people report into me. So never went through like a first time manager program, was never coached to become a leader. But I think what came beautifully to me is, again, the way I am as a person. I think I'm very people oriented. I'm generally, when I'm forming relationships, I spend a lot of time in terms of understanding people. So I think I did that. I made mistakes. I think I made mistakes, and I had a wonderful team who used to come in, and some used to, we used to have arguments on the floor as well. But I think they also taught me a lot by telling me what I was not doing right and also what I was doing right. But I owe it to also my leader at that point in time and the center's leader, who actually had a lot of faith in me in terms of what I can bring to the table. So while we all advocate training and coaching for first-time managers, I think I never got that opportunity. It's just that I got onto the role and I learned beautifully.
I fully agree with you on this, that preparedness is a complete myth. You're never truly prepared for anything in life, whether it's professional or personal, right? Like you sort of just learn on the go. And I think that's what's happened with me as well. Over the last few years, especially because when I was younger, I would sort of shy away from leadership roles or anything that had me in the center, like I would always shy away from it. But I think now I'm learning to embrace it a little bit more, because I can see there's so much more that can be done if I'm able to put my own inhibitions aside and learn from that experience and from the people around me, truly. Especially more from some of these startups that I work with. The CEOs are just amazing people, so driven, so passionate. There's just so much to learn from them as well.
Yeah, and Avantika, we can only limit ourselves. We actually limit ourselves. Nobody else does. Yeah. So I think, like you rightly said, those inhibitions, if we're able to manage for ourselves, I think there's so much more that we can do as individuals, right? So, yeah, but I think that's been my journey, where I've also taken on a lot of new things and I've never said no. And while it may not sound very appropriate to say that, oh, you never say no, I don't think it was. I looked at opportunities, as great opportunities, and I took them on. So I think that's how I got onto even my HR journey, even my leadership journey. So I think that's been a huge value add for me as I've moved along.
That's awesome. Love it. We'll move on to the next part. In many organizations, giving is sometimes misunderstood as slowing down personal growth. Neha, from your experience, how has mentoring, coaching, or advocating for others actually accelerated your own leadership journey?
Actually, I don't agree with this that personal or mentoring, coaching, leading people actually slows down your own personal growth. Actually, it is right the opposite, right? When you are working with people and when you're coaching, and I coach, I mentor a lot of talent, I think there's a lot that you learn yourself, right? You actually get to know a lot about what you are as an individual and as a professional. So I think that is a huge journey of evolution that happens as long as you're open to it, right? There are times when mentors and coaches get into a mentor-mentee relationship thinking that they know it all, right? But if you get onto that journey with humility and with saying that this is not only a one-way street, but a two-way road, then I think what happens is you get to learn a lot, plus you end up imparting a lot to the other individual, right? So my personal and professional growth has been humongous when I've taken this on. And I very naturally, even if I go back to my college days, I think I was always the person who, people would come and talk to about their problems and say, hey, I'm going through this and I need a shoulder to cry on. I somehow always had that kind of, let's say, a personality that I always exuded. And I think that became extremely relevant for my professional workspace also, where people started walking up to me. And I can also talk about one of the most, in one of my earlier roles, I was laid off. And it was a difficult time for me because that was the first time that it happened to me in my career. But at that point in time, I think that was a challenge for me. And I actually reached out to the world and I said, I've been through this. I'm sure many of us have. So if you need, somebody to talk to, somebody to just have, a word with, then I'm here. And before I actually landed my next job, which was not too much time, I think it was about 2 months, I would have coached about 30 people, right? And I think the amount of strength that I gained from those conversations, and I believe I also gave a lot of strength to people. I think there was a lot of confidence and self-motivation that they took back, I think was humongous. So at every step of the way where I am, coaching people, it's actually been very, very rewarding. And I do that a lot personally as well. So I actually work with a not-for-profit where I career counsel women of abuse, right? So when I listen to their story, there's so much that one can understand and be compassionate towards them and also guide them to get onto their road of being financially independent, getting confident about their own capabilities and being able to move forward, right? So I think my personal growth has been tremendous and I'm ever so grateful that I get this opportunity and I continue to get it.
I hope we can connect after the podcast also. Maybe you can give me some tips.
Oh, I would love to. I would love to.
But what you mentioned about giving people a platform to listen, for them to be heard, empathy has now become such a key component of being a good leader, right? Like that's what will separate a good leader from a good manager, because that being able to hear what your team member wants to say or just anyone around you wants to convey, without having that judgment or bias, being open to feedback, especially now in this day and age where people tend to take things personally and not the way they're meant to be, like I think that's so important. And
absolutely.
And I've been talking a lot about this on my LinkedIn page also a couple of months ago, where especially in the startup environment, now I bring up startups because I have been working with a few startups for a few years as well. Unless those CEOs are ready to hear that feedback, right? Like things are not going to change. There's only so much that we as HR can drive in culture, but it has to come from the top. The leaders have to enable their team. They have to show that, exhibit that behavior. Only then can the culture change.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. And I think if as leaders, there's one thing that we can really do well, apart from a lot of things that we're required to do, is really show compassion and be empathetic towards our teams. Because at the end of the day, Avantika, we're working with people. We're not working with machines, right?
Yeah.
Each of us has emotions. Each of us have needs. Each of us have, what inspires us, what lets us down. I think if as a leader, I don't understand that about my people and my teams, then I failed and I'm failing. So I think that plays a very, very critical role.
Absolutely. Moving on to the next question. So women leaders often have to carry the additional responsibility of representation. How can women leaders use their stories to create pathways for others without feeling the pressure to be seen as perfect?
Oh, this is such a complex answer. And, when I was preparing for this question, I think just so many things kind of came my way. I think, Avantika, this is actually a combination of your personal and professional life story, right? And I think it is very difficult to actually compartmentalize the two. And especially for women, they do tend to kind of bring all of it together. I think it is, if you go back to a woman's personal and professional journey and how they can really make an impact, is by talking about it, right? If we're not talking about it and we're not talking to other women and the rest of the organization, I don't think anybody would understand, right? So when today I'm a leader and I sit as part of the leadership team, but I'm not sure how many women get that opportunity to get there, right? And data actually shows us that it's only about 16 to 18% of the working women population who actually get to senior leadership. Now, my role as a senior leader and a senior woman leader is to actually talk to a lot of women, right? Talk to them about what they bring to the table in terms of their capabilities and competencies, to understand how those can be harnessed and then how those can actually convert to very tangible outcomes, at the workplace, and then be able to see that how they can actually grow. Right? So how do you become extremely, you start internalizing yourself much, much more. So that's when you start talking to people. So whether it is in my coaching journeys or mentoring journeys, I do have these conversations. Today, when I'm even addressing larger audiences, I talk about this. So that's really about conversation. That's really about sharing your own story. And I've had a fairly challenging personal journey as well. And I think I've learned a lot from that. Now comes, how do you systemically change all of this, right? Because it's not enough that you go and talk, but there is a systemic change that needs to be brought about, where there could be about the systems that we have, the processes that we have. What is the kind of vision that the leadership team has, or the CEO or the CXOs of the organization have? How do you get extremely pointed about the vision to say that we do want to grow talent within the organization, whether it is women or men, right? And how do we bring women to the forefront, right? So that's two is, what are the adequate policies and procedures that we really need to define at the workplace, which is going to enable and understand a lot of these challenges that exist at the workplace, and how do we fix those, right? And then the third is really about driving programs that are going to enable that. So, for example, returning mothers. Then how do you reach out to women who've really fended for their child and their family? They've been caregivers and they've taken a break for a while. but how do you actually go back to them and talk to them about saying, would you like to come back to work? Right? So Returning Mothers is a brilliant program, and it's running across various organizations and it's doing beautifully. I've run it myself, and we've had actually 30% of the women wanting to come back to workforce, right? But are we also creating that amount of flexibility for them to say that, okay, if you want to come back to work, you still have that little child at home. So what are we going to do to create that so that you don't feel that you're ignoring your child and you're also able to do a great job at work, right? So you have to implement and execute these, programs on the ground, and then have a very strong review mechanism around it, where it is reviewed at a senior level, at the CXO level, saying, what's happening about this program? Is it really yielding positive results? What are we being able to do about it? Right? So that's and finally, and which I really call, it's possibly the foundation of all of it, is how does the entire CXO team of the organization feel? Do they have a shared vision? And if they have that shared vision, are they sending the right signals across the organization saying, we believe in this, right? So I think, as a woman leader, I've actually understood that when you are wanting to advocate a lot of growth of women in the industry, right? You cannot just do that by becoming more of a, you're not a narebazi. You're not doing naras over there, right? You're actually doing a lot of good work, defining programs on the ground and driving them. So I think this has really worked well. And I think a lot of women who you'll speak to will talk about the real change that you bring upon the ground by running programs and leading them from the front.
So just a follow-up question to this. Now, how do you generally measure this impact, because we're deliberately putting these programs in place in the hope that it will have a positive impact. But how do we actually go about measuring that impact?
So one way is, of course, to identify what are the metrics that you want to look at. So for example, let's say if we're looking at a Returning Mothers program, right? And let's say we have a simple thing, like we have a database of 1,000 women, right? Then it is to track that how many women have we been able to get in touch with, right? So let's say we've been able to get to 20% of the women, which is about 200 women. Then you say that, okay, out of those 200, how many of them have actually expressed interest to say that we'd like to return? We'd like to come back to work. So that's going to be another certain population that you'd look at. So let's say that's another 100. Then you say for those 100, what are the skills and capabilities that they have that is going to be fitting to your workplace and your workspace, right? And then, so that's how you start looking at the funnel. And then you start measuring against that funnel, right? And you publish this data again and again so that the leadership has a very, very good view of it. And then two is you also become transparent about it. You start talking to your people about it, that look, we spoke about a returners program. This is what we're doing about it, right? This is the action we're taking. These are the projects that we have running around it. And this is the leader who's going to be single-handedly accountable around it, right? So there is a lot of seriousness and focus that comes around it. So that's around metrics. So that's just, I'm using the returners program because that's the thread we can just continue to talk about. The second is always very important to look at feedback, right? Who's going to give you your feedback? It is going to be your people. So you do need to go back to your people and say, hey, is this working? Is it making sense? What do you think? What are some of the changes that we can bring about to this entire initiative that we're driving? It is your people on the ground who are going to give you a lot of good feedback, right? And then you also go back to your, not people within the organization, but outside of the organization in the larger ecosystem, and you ask them, is this making sense? So you do focus groups, you run surveys, and you do it with that where there is a very unbiased view that comes to you. So in these ways, you will be able to measure and also course correct in terms of how you wish to move forward. So yes, so these are some of the things, and I can really talk about, and I did write about this long ago on LinkedIn, and I got a very good response to it in terms of saying that today there are a lot of people who want to make a difference in an organization. So how do you allow them to make that difference? And how does that turn into an initiative? So there are many, many ways, but I just wanted to talk about a few things that will actually drive focus around these.
No, thank you. That was really insightful. I think this will help me contextualize quite a few things as well. Now, moving on to the next question, let's talk about organizational culture. What can companies do to encourage women and all employees to share their stories, speak up, and support each other in the workplace?
This is a difficult one, and I think a lot of programs fail, Avantika, because we kind of get weak in our knees when it comes to a lot of these programs, right? I think, again, to make these programs extremely relevant and strong and drive outcomes, it is about bringing these stories to the forefront, right? And those could be through podcasts. Those could be through, having them come into town halls and talk about their success stories. It can be about highlighting their impact, their performance within their teams. So there's a lot that you can do from in terms of just bringing it to the forefront, right? But Avantika, always we need to remember that anything that we do always has to somewhere have an impact on the business, a positive impact on the business. Because if I don't have a positive impact on the business, there is no way that a CEO is going to drive this. Because the CEO's responsibility is about ensuring that the business runs successfully, one. And the CEO's role is also to ensure that his or her people are actually doing a great job and they're feeling inspired and motivated, right? So a lot of these initiatives and actually bringing them to the forefront is about linking it to the strategic goals, to the business goals, and saying, for example, if I were to run the returners program, and if I were to look at the number of open roles that exist in the organization today, there is X number of roles that I will be able to fulfill by bringing a lot of returning mothers. Now, if I bring in flexibility for them, let's say I give this option to a returning mother that she can actually work 4 hours from office and 4 hours from, let's say, home on a given day, not all days, but maybe on a given day. What's going to be the actual turnout in terms of number of hours? Because then she's also feeling very safe and she's getting to work from her home where she's also looking after her child, or she knows that I'm here and my child is safe. So what does that translate to? That translates to much better performance, right? That translates to motivation. That translates to feeling very positive about your work. When you feel inspired, when you feel motivated, when you feel positive about your work, you will only start innovating. You will start thinking of new ideas. You will start thinking of new ideas of doing different things. When you think of new ideas linked to your work, then how is that not going to make a difference to your business? It is always going to make a difference to your business. It is going to have a positive impact on your business, right? Yeah. Because I'm thinking differently. I'm not only looking at my job description and saying, I'm going to do this. I'm going to say, hold on, there is a better way of also doing it. I'm going to discuss with my manager and say, hey, I thought of a new idea. And if I have a good manager who's going to allow me and empower me, I'm going to actually implement that new, whether it's a process or a way of doing things. And that's going to positively impact my business. When I positively impact my business, there is growth, right? So all of this is very linked to impact on business. So that's how we have to really look at it. I know this is a very long answer to your question, but I thought it was important to bring in the perspective of impact of business also.
Yes. Yeah. No, absolutely right. I think in my experience, what I've realized over the last few years doing these consulting assignments is that when we go in as a third party, right, we somehow become the agony aunts for whoever we're speaking to. And we then become the torchbearers for what they truly want from the organization. So I think one way or another, I feel happy when I leave that assignment that I have helped the organization become a better place, where the employees now feel a little more confident about being able to voice their opinion, whether it is maybe just putting a note in the suggestion box or feeling a little more open with their manager to discuss really what their pain points are,
Absolutely.
So to me, that's how it's been over the last few years.
Absolutely. And imagine if you were to find these torchbearers within the organization, right?
Yeah.
They're influencers, they're positive influencers.
Yes.
If you could find them, and you'll find them plenty, as long as you're open and you're watching and you're actually giving them that opportunity, what a beautiful workplace you're going to create. So like what you said, Avantika, that's a happy story, right? When you actually go in, you do some great work, and then today, even when I drive a lot of consulting assignments, the thing that I can't stress enough on is this is not only about leaders, right? When you're driving change, when you're driving cultural transformation, this begins from the top. It is about going top down. But at the end of the day, if you're able to find those very, very smart and extremely inspired souls within the organization and tell them this is the change that you can bring about, look at it's like a holistic change that's taking place, right? And that's where everybody's hearing exactly the same message across the organization. Everybody's getting the same signal, and that's how you build cultures. Because when you start talking about a particular behavior, about a particular practice, about a particular value, and you see that consistently being driven over a period of time across the organization, that's culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
Culture is not happening only in a room, right? Culture is happening across. So that's how it works.
And I've worked with so many clients that we've actually framed the vision, mission, values for so many people, especially for startups. I think that's when I realized how much I genuinely enjoy doing that kind of work, where it really helps you understand whether people are truly on the same page or not. Even in a startup environment where the team is small, right? Like it can be really haphazard also, where the founder has a vision, but the team is really not walking on that same path. They're probably all over the place. But then to help them get on that same path, right, is really fulfilling for me. That just brings so much to the table.
Absolutely. You're actually very, very fortunate to have started this journey right in the beginning of your career. And I think that's such a beautiful journey to kind of walk through. So very, very nice to hear that.
Thank you. I think let's move on to the next question. For our leaders that are listening today, especially managers who are shaping the next generation, what's one action that they can start taking tomorrow to amplify voices within their own teams?
What a beautiful question. And, I always struggle to give a 1-point answer. So when I was thinking through the answer, I had I think 4 or 5 things that I wanted to recommend to managers. But having said that, I think the first thing that I always advise managers is always listen to understand, right?
Yeah.
Many a times as leaders, as managers, we don't listen enough. We talk, we speak, we provide sermons, we coach, we mentor. But how many of us are actually listening to our teams, listening to our workforce and saying, hey, what are you telling us, right? And no matter what, Avantika, you're again, like I go back to saying, you're working with humans, you're working with people. There is a whole set of complex emotions that that person is actually dealing with when they come and talk to you. So whether it is a personal story they share, whether it is a challenge at work, whether it is challenge with another colleague, whether it is challenge with a leader, whether it is challenge with just making themselves more impactful and effective, there is a certain emotion that's coming out of there, right? If you're not going to listen to understand, you will never understand that emotion.
Yeah.
Okay. And if you can somehow address that emotion and then address the challenge or the problem, you'll actually have a very successful individual who's going to turn around and say, hey, I'm going to be able to overcome this. Right? So my advice to every leader is listen to understand.
Yeah.
Right? There's so much more. There's empathy. There is being able to, and of course, when you say listen to understand, empathy anyways weaves in so well into this, right? It kind of just sits so well. And while there are many other skills, I have to become a good listener. I have to be able to build that. And I actually learned that from my daughter because as a growing child, and she's always been a very inquisitive child where she, if you told her this is what needs to be done, she would turn around and say, why? You know, her question was why? And while we've been brought up in an environment and a stereotypical environment where children don't question their parents, you do what your parents are asking you to do because they're your parents, right? But I think I'm so grateful that my daughter got me to start thinking and listening to what her questions were all about and why was she asking those questions. So I became so adept to listening very, very well and asking questions. So if anybody would within my team would come and say, hey, Neha, I need to speak with you. And I would say, okay, come on, let's. So let's say I'm getting onto a meeting, right? I'm getting onto a one-on-one meeting with my team member. And my team member says, hey, Neha, I wanted to speak to you. I'm going to actually set aside that work that I was going to talk about and say, first, let's talk. Right. And if that's related to something that that individual's been struggling with, then I'm really, really wanting to help her or him go through that entire, you know, to look at that resolve. So I think listen to understand. I can't stress that enough. Listen to understand.
No, absolutely agree with you, Neha. And to just add on to what you said, I feel also being able to pass on the mic to them, giving them the opportunity, enabling them, empowering the team to take up something more, something that they wouldn't usually do, you know, and also then letting them fail, even if they do, and not reprimanding them for that failure, but then also helping them see that there is something to learn from this failure also, right? I feel is something that will truly help us make them move forward in their lives and their careers as well. Because especially as kids, like, and in the Indian context, we're always taught that failure is the worst thing that can happen to us, right? Like it's drilled into our heads, and failure is always looked at something really, it's almost like a taboo sort of topic. And then for people to have that chance where they are given that opportunity and they're allowed to fail. You know, I think many companies, I'm sure you would have also heard about it. They run this fail fast Fridays sort of a thing. So giving people that platform, you know, I think is truly important.
Oh yeah. And again, I do agree with you. And I think watch out for my story on LinkedIn, where I am going to tell you and talk about that failures are such an integral part of our journey, right? And anybody who's failed and picked themselves up and gone ahead is bravo. I mean, I just say bravo. I say nothing more. And it is very, very important that when you fail, you understand the lessons and you move forward, and you don't resent and regret,
Yeah.
but you actually very, very excitedly get onto that journey, right?
Mhm.
And also, I like the thing that you said, hand over the mic. And so many times, Avantika, leaders don't wish to hand over the mic because they feel that it's going to take away the impact that they bring to the table. It's
Mhm.
going to take away the limelight that they have.
Mhm.
But believe you and me, the moment you start handing over the mic to your team, everybody knows why and how that person is standing on the stage, right?
Mhm.
It is because there is a certain amount of capability that that individual brings to the forefront, and you're actually making that happen to a
Mhm.
person who possibly would not have had the courage to get onto stage.
Yeah.
And that's just one example that I'm using. So handing over the mic to your team time and again is a very powerful transformation story. And I think it weaves back to one of your earlier questions, that how do you actually enable a lot of success stories at your
Yeah.
workplace? And second is encourage people to learn from their failures and not be fearful,
Yeah.
because failures build courage. Courage builds very, very positive stories. Positive stories creates positive impact. Positive impact creates positive, work that we do. And that positive work eventually leads to great impact on the business.
Yep.
Right?
Mm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Just to add a little personal touch here. So when I decided to move back to Pune after my MBA, I graduated during COVID. So the job market was obviously very tough. I gave it some time, but then I had to decide, right, like whether I should stay on there and keep looking or should I move back. Like as a human, you go through that entire spiral of if I go back, does this mean I failed at what I came here to do? Or does this mean that there's something better waiting for me back home, And through that spiral, I eventually came to the conclusion that yes, I do want to move back home, and I know that there is something better waiting for me. Just because this didn't work out for me, that doesn't mean that nothing else can work out. So then I did end up taking that leap of faith and moving back home. And here I am with all of you.
That's so nice. That's really nice to hear. And I do hope a lot of people who are watching this podcast also learn from what your journey has been. But very nice to hear that.
Thank you.